everyone. My name is Caitlin Barham, and today I will be talking about plastic pollution on oceanographic processes. Um, in this presentation, I will discuss how plastic, especially microplastics, affects marine ecosystems, biodiversity, and even global environmental health. We'll cover pathways of plastics into the ocean, the key issues it causes, and the urgent need for systematic change to address this crisis. So to outline my presentation, one of the primary concerns is that plastic, particularly microplastic, enters marine ecosystems through various pathways, including rivers, waste mismanagement, accumulating in ocean gyres, and forming large garbage patches. Once in the ocean, these plastics degrade into smaller particles, microplastics, which are easily ingested by marine life. Understanding the effects of plastics on ocean is critical, as it impacts not just the marine biodiversity, but also the human health and planet's climate system. Plastic debris not only disrupt the ocean's natural functions, but it also transports invasive species across ecosystems, leading to disruption in biodiversity and food webs. So, also a couple of key concepts that we'll discuss throughout the presentation. Microplastics are small plastic particles that are less than 5 millimeters in size. Is a result from the breakdown of larger plastics. Ocean gyres are large systems of rotating circles or rotating ocean currents where plastic accumulates, forming garbage patches. And bioaccumulation is the process by which toxins from plastic enter and build up in the marine organisms and consequently in the food webs. So, a little bit of background information. Plastic production began in the earnest during the mid 20th century, with global production nowadays exceeding 380 million tons annually, which is kind of just almost incomprehensible. Mismanagement of plastic waste has led to approximately 8 million tons of plastic entering our ocean each year. Key pathways include rivers that act as conveyor belts, fueling plastic into the oceans, coastal currents where improper disposal contributes to marine population, and direct dumping and shipping activities that occur in the ocean. Another role is ocean currents. Ocean currents are driven by wind and Earth's rotation. They create gyres where plastic accumulates. The most infamous example is the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which is located between Hawaii and California, and it spans with an estimated 1.6 million square miles, and it contains 1.8 trillion pieces of plastic. So this is kind of just an example here of plastic pollution in the ocean. But one of the key things that I found within my research, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, was that how hard the cleanup was, and just I never really realized how much plastic pollution was in the ocean and going into these big garbage patches, and specifically the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, and digging more research into that was really interesting. So some key issues and areas of focus throughout the presentations are microplastics that we discussed earlier. They're particles smaller than 5 millimeters in size and are either manufactured as microbeads or result from the breakdown of larger plastics. These particles are found throughout the water column and even in the deepest parts of the ocean. This impacts marine organisms by entering their digestive systems and tissues. bioaccumulates in the food chain, eventually reaching humans. It alters the chemical composition of seawater by absorbing toxins such as PCBs and DDTs, which we'll discuss later. Ocean gyres and garbage patches act as a trap for floating plastics. These garbage patches not only disrupt marine habitats, but also interfere with ocean mixing, reducing nutrient distribution. They also serve as transportation mechanisms for invasive species, upsetting local ecosystems. Some impacts that they have on biodiversity and food webs, marine species, including fish, turtles, seabirds, and seabirds mistake plastic for food, and over 700 species have been affected by this plastic ingestion. Plastic debris also causes physical harm, such as entanglement and internal injuries. Toxins from ingested plastics accumulate predators higher up in the food chain, such as humans in this instance. Disruption of oceanographic processes. These floating plastics change the surface albedo of the ocean, which affects heat absorption and potentially alters local weather patterns. Plastic debris sinking into the ocean floor influence sediment transportation and nutrient cycling. And it also impedes gas exchange processes crucial for regulating ocean atmospheric interactions. So some of my findings, like we had talked about earlier, the transport of invasive species, plastics serve as rafts for marine ecosystems and enabling species to travel vast distances. This disrupts local ecosystems by introducing competition and predators that native species may not typically be equipped to handle. Um, the impacts that on marine species and ecosystems, as we talked about earlier, over 700 species, including seabirds, fish, and marine mammals, are affected by plastic pollution. I added this again, for example, we talk about sea turtles. Typically, when we talk about sea turtles, they talk about metal straws or cutting the plastics from your water bottles so that their fins don't get caught, or fishing nets, or things like that that you typically see, like the pictures of sea turtles. But I thought that this was a really interesting fact here, that sea turtles often mistake plastic bags for jellyfish, leading to intestinal blockages and eventually death. Um, Another part is that toxins like PCBs and heavy metals adhere to microplastics, and when ingested, these chemicals bioaccumulate within the marine organisms, and then they magnify as it moves farther up the food chain. This has implications for human health, particularly for populations that are reliant on seafood. And it also affects coral reefs. They're already under a threat from climate change, but they additionally face stress from plastic debris. Plastic physically damages reefs and introduce pathogens that further degrade these critical ecosystems. So some more research findings, plastic accumulation in gyres, like we had mentioned quite a bit. Ocean gyres are driven by prevailing winds and Earth rotation patterns, and they act as massive traps for plastic debris. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch alone has over 1.8 trillion plastic pieces, and it also weighs an estimated 80,000 metric tons. Similar patches exist in the North Atlantic, South Atlantic, and Indian Ocean gyres, where plastics accumulate due to the circular motion of currents. Research has shown from the ocean cleanup projects that they highlight that many of these areas are predominantly composed of microplastics, which persists for decades due to the resistance of degradation, which I also talked about this a little bit earlier, but the Ocean Cleanup Project, they tried to do a big cleanup project within the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, and it was partially successful, but they hadn't realized or really had enough research done around that area and really into um, the garbage patch, like underneath, that whenever they found small enough nets to trap these microplastics, you still have big pieces of plastics, but also majority microplastics. They had a hard time picking that up with net, so they found some small enough and knitted them together. And then, but not only did they remove that, but then more just arose from the bottom. And so it was a really interesting study and project that they did there. Another one, a study published by Science Direct, found that plastics not only float, but also fragment into smaller particles, dispersing vertically through the water column. These fragments, like we stated earlier, are eventually consumed by marine ecosystems or organisms and at all trophic levels. Floating plastics can alter the reflectivity of ocean surfaces, affecting heat absorption and potentially influencing local and global weather patterns. Plastic that sinks into the seafloor can also change sediment composition, impacting benthic ecosystems. And also, large-scale plastic coverage interferes with natural nutrient mixing processes driven by currents, which reduces the ability of essential nutrients in certain marine areas. So some ecological and economical impacts and implications uh, that are happening within plastic pollution in the ocean. The introduction of plastics into marine environment reduces species biodiversity by causing physical harm, toxic exposure, and habitat destruction. Species such as phytoplankton and foundation of marine food webs are directly affected by plastic ingestion. Um, Research has also shown that pathogens adhere to plastics, spreading disease to marine life and potentially to humans. Some economical implications. Plastic pollution reduces fishing populations and contaminates aquaculture operations, resulting in economic losses for culture opportunities. Plastic debris damage boats, engines, and disrupt shipping lanes, leading to increased maintenance and operational costs as well. So human health risks that we face, toxic exposure, microplastic in seafood introduce toxins to human diets, posing risks of endocrine disruption, cancer, and other health conditions. And also research indicates that microplastics are present in 83% of tap water, raising concerns about long-time health impacts. Um, we also had a call for systematic change. Governments must adopt stricter regulations on plastic production and disposal bans, using plastic incentives and for biodegradable materials and extended producer responsibility programs are critical steps that need to be taken. Advances in biodegradable plastics and large-scale recycling systems can reduce environmental footprints of plastics. And campaigns to educate the public on the impacts of plastic pollution can drive behavioral changes such as reduced plastic use and increased participation in recycling programs. So challenges in mitigation, cleaning up plastic pollution is difficult due to the vastness of oceans and the continuous influx of new debris. Projects like the ocean cleanup have shown promise but face limitations in scale and cost. Experts agree that preventing plastics from entering the ocean is more effective than attempting to remove existing pollution. This requires global cooperation to improve waste management systems, reduce single-use plastics, and encourage recycling. Potential long-term consequences. If unaddressed, plastic pollution could lead to an irreversible change in oceanic systems, such as altered heat distribution and ocean circulation patterns. Marine ecosystems could collapse under the combined pressures of plastic pollution, climate change, and overfishing, threatening food security and global economies. So overall, we've seen that plastic pollution profoundly impacts oceanographic processes such and marine ecosystems. It disrupts natural function, endangers marine life, and compromises the health of the ocean as a whole. To combat this crisis, a global effort is required to reduce plastic pollution, improve waste management, and raise awareness. Immediate reaction is crucial to protect the ocean health for future generations. And here is a list of my references. And thank you all for joining me.